WisconsinEye's Campaign 2024 programming is sponsored by Wisconsin Counties Association, Nicolet National Bank, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Operating Engineers Local 139, the Wisconsin Realtors Association, the Wisconsin Laborers District Council, and North Central State's Regional Council of Carpenters. To support programs like this, please consider a tax-deductible donation at wisci.org/donate or by texting WisCi to 44321.
Stacey Klein of Trempealeau is the Republican candidate for the 32nd Senate District. The election is November 5th. Stacey Klein, welcome to WisconsinEye.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Thanks for participating in our candidate interview. I'll just start by asking you, what is your campaign's key message? Why are you running for this office?
Sure, so I represent local government. I'm on the Trempealeau County Board, so a lot of what we've been discussing, even just on doors, is bringing that effectiveness, efficiency of the local government up to the state level, because we have to approach everything in a nonpartisan lens, and usually we're very limited on resources, so we have to prioritize, and again, like I said, be very efficient and effective, and also push to get more money back to the local governments so that we can take care of those basic needs.
So if you're elected, what's an example of a bill that would be a priority for you to introduce?
Well, I would like to see increase in shared revenue. I know we just passed that, so that's probably going to be a more lengthy process, but I have been speaking with other legislators about mental health, and even with Trempealeau County, I'm part of the County Health Improvement Program. So looking at how we can partner with schools, libraries, hospitals, local organizations, and what we could do to make sure that it's more readily available, especially in the schools, because I hear that they do have to change providers from time to time because of costs, or some providers just won't even give that service anymore due to the costs. So looking at how we can bring in, whether it's telehealth or an avenue for people to become licensed in those areas, just so we have a larger amount of services and we can provide that to more people.
So if you're elected to the Senate, you'll be entering during a biennial budget year. The state's projected to have more than a $3 billion surplus. What would be your top two priorities for use of that surplus funding?
I think with there we can find some really good common ground with, I mean, we know how people are really struggling just to afford to live right now. So if we can get some money back out in the form of tax relief, but then also going back to local government, getting more money back to the locals so they can take care of the basic things like roads, broadband, and some of the other mandated services that come down from the state.
When you talk about tax relief, is that kind of one-time tax relief, or are you thinking about broader tax reform? What's part of your platform? I
mean, ideally it would be broader, but it's going to depend on where we're at with that surplus money and if it has to be, where that revenue is coming from. So if that's more one-time type money, then we're going to have to be restricted to the one time. But if it's something where we can build it into the budget and it is more long-term, that would be preferable.
A tax cut across the board, do you think, for everyone? Or is there certain groups?
Yeah. I think we did see some good stuff in the legislature, this last legislative session that I think would have helped quite a few families, but across the board. And that's one of those areas where I'm one of those people, I try to get as much information as I possibly can from all sources and then make that really informed decision. So I would be open to discuss any range of that.
K-12 education is a priority for many Wisconsin voters. What's your campaign's top priority for K-12 education?
So I think we need to figure out how we have a system that attracts good talent in our schools. So making sure that we have adequate pay, benefits. We live, right along the Minnesota border here. I do hear stories of some teachers that get out of school and then they, maybe they live here, but then they teach over in Minnesota. So looking at the differences there and how we can attract that talent and then incentivize them to stay here as well, so that we have those leaders in place so that our kids are getting the best education.
Would you increase funding for public K-12 education in order to accomplish that?
I know we had a large increase this last time around, so that's where I'm curious to go through, see what kind of audits are available, see where we're spending the money, if there's any efficiencies where we can, if there's areas where we really don't need to be spending that money, we can shift it, like I said, to bringing in those types of teachers. But ultimately, I probably would be in favor of increasing, but then that gets into, how much is enough and how do we determine that?
What about the state's higher education system? 4-year colleges, 2-year colleges, technical colleges. What does the future of that system look like to you, and where should the legislature be focusing?
Well, just from what I'm seeing, we have such a lack of workers in the trades. So I see a lot more of the focus going to our 2-year programs, our technical schools. But again, going back to kind of that same theme with the K-12, getting into where is the money being spent in the UW system and finding out if there's places where we can utilize those efficiencies, we can make some changes and get more money there. But I see a bigger wave of young people going into those 2-year schools so that they can get their education right away, get out and start working, and there are careers that have a high demand for workers too.
What do you see as the state's largest workforce development challenge, and what would you propose to address it?
So I was just at the Wisconsin Counties Association conference earlier this week, and one of the workshops I went to was about Wisconsin economy, and we talk about the aging population and then the low birth rate, and so now we just have such a labor workforce shortage. So how do we as a state attract those families in to these jobs? So I think that's going to be our biggest challenge, because we always have had a really good economy. I mean, they were going back into numbers back in the 90s, and just Wisconsin was such a strong leader, and we are still in top numbers compared to a lot of the other states, but we tended to be a little higher. So looking at how we can work on childcare, we can work on housing, so that we can get those families to come here to Wisconsin or stay here after school, whatever it is, and continue to develop our economy.
A few more workforce questions for you.
Yeah, sure.
Investments in public and energy infrastructure grow our state's economy. This also provides an opportunity to invest in our state's workforce, but currently there are no requirements for hiring local workers. Would you support a state resident hiring requirement for state, local, and utility scale infrastructure investments?
I don't think that would work well for us, especially here in western Wisconsin. We do see a lot of people that cross over the river between Minnesota and Wisconsin, so I don't want us to put up a barrier to having good workers come into this state to work. Also making sure that we have the expertise, the most qualified people for these jobs, and again, I don't want to put up that type of barrier, because I think overall it would be better for western Wisconsin, and then developing that economy if we can draw in the best to take care of this type of work.
Sure. Employee classification is an issue in the construction industry. Some employers misclassify workers as independent contractors or pay them in cash off the books. This lowers costs by avoiding payroll taxes and unemployment insurance, but it puts compliant companies at a disadvantage when bidding on projects. Plus, misclassified workers may be denied minimum wage protections or overtime pay. Are you aware of this issue, and what do you think should be done about it?
So I've heard of the issue. I'm not aware of examples here in western Wisconsin. That doesn't mean that that's not happening, but if that is going on, paying under the books, paying cash, that's against the law, so we want to make sure that that's rectified. But this is a topic where, like I said, we haven't seen it as much, or it hasn't been brought to our attention as much, so I would like to know, what kind of legislation would be brought forth, and then have conversations to see what's going to be the best route going forward.
Sure. Transitioning to housing, affordable rental housing is an issue in Wisconsin. Some support government-imposed rent control to maintain affordability, while others argue keeping rent artificially low will decrease rental supply, resulting in increased prices. What is your sense of housing as an issue, and which best addresses rental housing affordability? Is it rent control, or building more rentals, or some other solution?
Yeah, and I don't think it's rent control. I don't think the government should get involved to that extent. That is one thing we discussed at the conference, just the necessity of building more, whether it's apartments or workforce housing. We had the package that went through last session. So just there were a number of items of there where there were great incentives for the developers, the builders, and it's going to take some time to really see how that'll impact our whole state. So I'm excited to see how that goes in the future, and then see if we do need to make some tweaks there. But as far as government, I think we'd be overstepping if we put in rent controls and then take a look at all the different aspects that we addressed in that last package to see how that helps, and then see if we need to make any additions to that going forward.
Moving on to healthcare. Medical systems are facing numerous headwinds in the form of inflation, workforce development, and issues around Medicare and Medicaid reimbursement, resulting in fewer services and even the closure of a hospital system in western Wisconsin. What would you do to preserve access to care and prevent future closures?
So a couple different areas. So one, I've been getting to know the federally qualified healthcare. Like Scenic Bluffs is in our area, and they're expanding, and that focuses on rural health care and more so on the preventative side. So I think that helps take some of the pressure off of our larger systems. So building on those types of systems, but then also taking a look, making sure with Medicaid, that the pricing is where it needs to be in order for people to be getting this type of care.
So you're in favor of increasing Medicaid rates to hospitals?
Taking a look at, and it's delving into the different procedures, and we just sometimes it doesn't keep up with how the pricing really is going. So making sure that we're monitoring that on a regular basis and that we are keeping up with that.
You mentioned mental health care as a priority. I want to make sure you have a chance to talk about why that's a priority for you and how you think it should be addressed specifically in your local area.
Mm-hmm. So it is. It's a problem for our whole entire country, especially our younger generation. So I think we need to make sure that we're collaborating, which I'm really excited about what the county is doing right now, and just the different entities that we're working with to see how can we help, especially our younger generation. So making sure that we prioritize that when we're looking at the budget. I know there are ways that we could be pulling down those barriers when it comes to what professionals can be working with our kids, but then also looking at veterans in all ages, because it's something that's going on no matter what age you are. So taking a look at how we can work with our partners and collaborate, and then
prioritizing state dollars even?
And I think that too, just going back on, when we look at the budget, where can we look for efficiencies? Like, I know through the pandemic, there were office workers that, a lot of people started working from home and didn't have to go in anymore. Well, if the state is still paying for leases, let's identify those, find out and make that decision. Do we need this building, or can we just let this go and save the taxpayers some money? So looking for those types of areas where we can shift it to places where it's going to be better spent for our taxpayers.
Sure. Abortion policy. How should Wisconsin move forward on the issue of abortion?
So I know we're waiting on a couple court decisions, so that'll look at the constitutionality of the current law. And then what was determined not that long ago was up to 20 weeks. So I think going forward, depending on what's determined in the courts, I don't see much change going on from that. But this is one of those topics where I know as an elected official, people entrust you to make decisions on behalf of who you represent. But this is a unique issue where if something were to come through the legislature, my instinct would be to have a whole bunch of listening sessions. I want to know what Western Wisconsin believes, what they feel about this, get a better understanding. And I think it wouldn't only be for how I would vote on their behalf, but I think it would be really good just to get people in a room and discuss this so we can, like I said, get a better understanding where people come from.
Do you support the current 20-week limit?
I have some mixed feelings on that one, going that far. When it comes to weeks, I haven't dialed in exactly on that. I know my faith tells me one thing, but I also have compassion and want to approach in a human way when it comes to some of these situations, because they're very challenging. I don't know what it's like to be in them, and I want to make sure people have options to navigate through that. So I think through more conversations, we'd have a much better idea as to where that number of weeks would fall.
Transitioning to transportation, what are the pressing transportation needs in your district, and how important is it that these needs are addressed and for the state to keep on schedule with construction of aging interstates and significant corridors of commerce?
So we have really good interstate state roads. We've been happy with those. I think getting down more into the nitty-gritty of the locals, that's where we want to make sure, well, state funding for local government had stagnated since the 80s, and so shared revenue was a great step in the right direction, but there's a lot more work to be done there, and then also the general transportation aids were unfortunately vetoed from the last budget. So making sure that we can, in the state budget, we're not going to make up that difference, that 80%, but making sure that we can prioritize that as well.
Local roads?
Yes, yeah. I mean, you're going to see with me, we're working in local government. We see these problems all day, every day. So that's going to be a top priority for me if elected.
What about PFAS and water quality issues? Those contaminants are a concern for a growing number of Wisconsinites. Do you see this as an important issue, and how would you propose to address it?
Absolutely. Yeah, in our district we have French Island, so they're living on bottled water. So we have $125 million sitting in Madison that's, unfortunately because of differences of opinion hasn't been released yet. So that is a top priority for us as well, to make sure the voters in our district can go forward with that. And I know that municipality itself, they've been finding grants and money from other areas where they can really start to move forward on this. And so if we can give them that final push, and they can really get going on solving that issue.
You support releasing those dollars out of joint finance?
Well, that's challenging, because then that would mean they're overriding the governor's veto. So I don't know if we want to go down that road, because that removes the checks and balances from government. I think we really need to find where we can all agree and just get this done. And again, coming with the local government background, like we have our deadlines. We only have so much money. We don't approach it in Republican or Democrat way. We just look at what's best for the community, get it done.
Last two questions. How would you describe the leading differences between you and your opponent?
So I've mentioned before about the local government background, but I've also been a natural mediator, and that's a skill I've just worked to build on. So always looking for where is that common ground, because I believe wholeheartedly we can always find some common ground and then build from there. So seeing where, and that's one thing that just out knocking doors, a lot of people they miss that, the idea of both sides just working together. So bringing that mentality. Also, if there's a bill that's not perfect, but it's going to help our community, like that PFAS bill, I'm going to vote for it, because I want to get that done. I want to help our community, and I'm not going to let other things stand in that way.
Final question. So let's say you're elected this fall and you get a magic wand you can use in the state capitol to resolve one issue in a way that brings all parties together. What would that issue be?
Yep. Again, going back to local governments, making sure we have mandated programs through the state that are not funded properly. So bringing money for that, and then helping to bridge that gap where state funding has not kept up with local governments, and making sure that our local people, where it's closest to the source, that they have the money that they need to really get things done.
Well, thank you, Stacey Klein from Trempealeau, the Republican candidate for the 32nd Senate District. The election is November 5th. Stacey Klein, thank you for talking with WisconsinEye.
Thank you.
This programming is brought to you by our generous sponsors. Thank you for watching.